I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost is with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello, this is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about the big debate that happened last night between Senator JD Vance and Governor Tim Walz. Of course, Vance is Trump's VP candidate, and Tim Walz is Kamala Harris's VP candidate. And it was undoubtedly a W for JD Vance. I'm not saying that to be nice. I would definitely tell you if he lost, but I expected him to win and to win handedly because he's just really, really good at interviews and confrontational interviews. And not only did he do well against Tim Walz, he did well against the moderators. And what people are pointing out is that many times Republicans, they will have this victim mentality, like, what, everyone is against us, everyone is against us, everyone is against us. And it's like, well, at some point you have to fight back. Yes, it's true that everyone is, the media is against you, et cetera, but you have to fight back in some kind of way. Now, Donald Trump is very good at punching back the reporters in the face. You're gonna be mean to me, I'm gonna be mean to you. You know, I'm gonna match your energy. I'm not even gonna match it. I'm gonna go beyond. I'm gonna go supersonic when I attack you. So, and people, you know, like that Trump is a fighter, but sometimes he's a whiner too. JD Vance, it was unfair, obviously. Things were stacked against him, but he still took on the moderators and Tim Walz at the same time. Now, I'm not saying Republicans should always have to, I don't know, accept that they're going to be in these kinds of situations, and maybe the media, if they want access, they need to treat Republicans better. Like Trump, for instance, said that he's not going to deal with 60 Minutes until they apologize for saying the Hunter Biden laptop story was misinformation, because they fought him real hard. And of course, Donald Trump was right about that. So so we can limit the, I don't know, the media until they kind of act a little bit better, or try to, you know, get the debate commission back together, even though they screwed up last time too. It's just rough. We know it's not going to be fair, but JD Vance went in there and he called them out on their foolishness. And I will show you an example in case you did not watch it last night. I did, and it was almost boring toward the end because you just knew JD was going to deliver. But Tim Walz did not absolutely do terrible. You know, it wasn't like Joe Biden failure or anything like that. But he did unfortunately say that he was friends with school shooters, for example. Every time I love watching the look on my family's face, like, how was the debate? And I'm like, Tim Walz said he's friends with school shooters, and they're just like, what? And I got to tell my brother that before he went to work that night. And then when my sisters got back from the movies, I got to see their faces, and it was pretty hilarious. Yes, he did say that. And obviously it was like an unfortunate moment where he misspoke. He says that he misspeaks quite a lot, and him misspeaking is usually just him lying. But this was an instance where he actually misspoke, and it was probably one of the worse instances of that in the campaign cycle. So and people, he's already getting trolled. But anyway, before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website. It costs to stream and run my site, do all that kind of stuff. So if you guys can support, I very much do appreciate you. So you guys can also give stars for watching on Facebook. You guys can do super chats if you're watching on YouTube. I do read super chats as long as they're not gross or crazy, anything like that. I will read them and I appreciate it. But the best way to donate is to go directly to the website. You guys can also check out different merch that's available at the store. Like I got my black tea mug right here that I'm drinking out of today, and I got other mugs. I have a Trump mug that's pumpkin spice season. Let me see if I can find it, pull it up real quick. Yeah, right here. It's a little chibi Trump. This is pumpkin spice season, so you guys can go ahead and pick that up for someone in your life or maybe for yourself. And I have other stuff like my Money My Business t-shirt, which I made that because I was sick of people saying like abortion is just between woman and a doctor. I'm like, well, then why do you want my taxpayer dollars involved? That doesn't seem to make any sense. It can apply to a lot of things, but I got this cool Frederick Douglass shirt, the Constitution's Glorious Liberty document, and other stuff as well. So I encourage you guys to check out different stuff that's available on the shop that also supports the show as well. I'm still elevating my background a bit. You know, you see some of my books covers that are behind me here, and I got some little shelving here. I'm trying out some stuff. Those are being held up by command things. So, you know, the little command stuff. So hopefully this is an experiment today. So if the shelving falls, we'll know it wasn't strong enough. But we'll see. We'll find out together. So but I think it looks okay, pretty nice right now. I have little lights that are supposed to be in front of me, but they were not charged. So tomorrow my face will be more highlighted. So anyway, I know I talked about this yesterday and I don't want to be long about this because I actually today I had a kind of an emotional day, but again, thank you to everyone who offered condolences to my family, to me in my very difficult time of losing my mother. You know, I that's why I wasn't streaming for like 3 weeks. So, you know, got to get back on the horse eventually. So, you know, there's so much news, especially as we're so close to the election. So, you know, had to get back to my normal routine, but it is very strange getting back to a normal routine and someone who is part of your routine isn't there. Like my sisters went to the movies yesterday and I was in the kitchen before they came home. Sometimes I'll go to the movies with them. I don't normally go too often because I'd rather well, last night I was watching the debate, so I didn't go, but I thought to myself, I'm like, mom usually gets a big bucket of popcorn and she brings back the leftovers for me. And I'm like, there's probably not going to be any popcorn. And I wasn't sad because there would be popcorn for me. I mean, they had some popcorn there. I could have microwaved or whatever. So it wasn't really about the popcorn. It was just this normal thing. It wasn't going to happen. So it's just little things like that, you know, that get you, you know, creep up and get you. So I thank you guys for advising me to take time and, you know, all the time that I needed, but I still got a job to do. So I'm glad that I can talk it out with you guys. And but you guys, so many likes, so many comments, so many condolences, so many thoughts and prayers that I so much appreciated. My family so much appreciated. So thank you guys. And anyway, let's go. So again, last night it was just a domination for JD Vance. And I had questions about when Trump first picked him. There are reasons that I'm just like, I don't know about this. But very quickly, after you start doing interview after interview after interview, I'm like, this kid is pulling his weight. Like he's really out there making a case for Trump that's better than a case that Trump himself can kind of make. I guess I don't have a clip pulled up of this, but an example. They brought up in the debate how Donald Trump said and this is one of the worst moments of the debate that Trump had. They asked him about, like, you had all this time to work out healthcare. You have not produced a solution for healthcare, and you guys said you're going to repeal Obamacare, and you didn't repeal Obamacare. And so what's up with that? Do you have a plan or not? After all this time, do you have a plan? And Trump was like, well, I have concepts of a plan. And that was a super not great moment for Donald Trump. So they, of course, brought it up. And JD Vance was like, yeah, this went viral and stuff. And he just began to explain the concepts of the plan. And uh, they mentioned that Obamacare was going to collapse just from the weight of it not being built up great, especially with people not just kind of jumping onto it. And then there were things that they had to go in and reinforce within it, and more people actually signed up while Trump was president for Obamacare and stuff. So he just made some really good points about things that they were doing. He just made Trump look better. The goal of JD Vance and Tim Walz was obviously to make their candidate for president look better, to make their policies and their vision look better. They didn't even spend a lot of time, close to no time, attacking each other. It was solely about the people running for president and trying to make them look good and the opposite person look bad. And JD Vance, he really, really succeeded in his mission in making Trump look good and defending him, normalizing him to a wider audience, normalizing him to independents who they're trying to win over. And he also attacked Kamala Harris. He was so good. They ask a question, he pivots, he answers in the way that he wants to answer, and then he attacks. He's so good at it. And Tim Walz, he wasn't so good he wasn't as good as JD Vance as far as like thinking on his feet. And it's very hard to defend Kamala Harris because she's currently the vice president of the United States. It's very hard to complain about. You have to complain a little bit about how the world is, because you can't just say, no, the economy is actually really good, when people don't feel like the economy is really good. People resent being told that, oh, everything's great, when they can't afford their groceries or they're about to be kicked out of their house and all kinds of stuff. So at first, like, Biden and other folks were like, no, everything's great. But Kamala Harris, you see her going on the campaign trail saying, it is hard. It's hard to afford this, hard to afford that, hard to afford this, that, et cetera, et cetera. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump took a clip of her admitting how hard things are. And then all he did was say, I'm Donald Trump. I approve of this message, because her acknowledging that things aren't great is a damnation on her and Joe Biden, because they're the ones in charge, not Trump. So they have to acknowledge it, or else they're going to just tick off their voters. And so Tim Walz has a hard task, because they are the incumbent, and if people want a change, Trump is the change. It's interesting because it's also like going back to how things were before. I would love if the Trump administration, not the Trump administration, but the Trump campaign, if they just had some imagery of, like, you're about to drive off a cliff or something, and instead of driving off the cliff like at full speed, which would be like what you're doing with voting for Kamala Harris, they're just like, you know what, put it in reverse. Sometimes the only option to go forward is to go in reverse. Like, like, you have to go back to be safe, to be, for your family or whatever. You can't just drive off the cliff. Some kind of imagery like that, because that's what people are contemplating. Like, do we just continue charting on this course, or, oh gosh, we got to go back to Trump? Sometimes that's the only option, is to just put it in reverse, right? So I think that's imagery that people can connect to and understand. So Tim Walz had a hard task, and when he tried to go after Trump, JD Vance just had really good rebuttals. He really did. So JD Vance really succeeded, and the moderators could not get JD Vance in the way that they really wanted to, because JD Vance wasn't having any of their foolishness. Now, let me get the school shooter thing out of the way. He clearly, I think, misspoke, and I think he meant to say, that he knew school shooting victims because they were asking Tim Walz like, why have you changed your positions on guns, like because you're more like anti-guns than you were before. And he's like, because I met the victims of Sandy Hook and I've talked to them. He's like, I'm friends with school shooters is what he said. And I think he meant to say I'm friends with people who've seen school shootings or school shooting victims, something like that. But he said I'm friends with school shooters. So what's interesting about that, we can all acknowledge that that is a mistake that he said, right? We all know that's a mistake. If Donald Trump had said something like that, I'm pretty sure Kamala Harris, in all seriousness, and Tim Walz would just be on the campaign trail saying, Donald Trump says that he's actually friends with school shooters. Like that's the route that they would go. They would throw that in there with a bloodbath and tyrant or a dictator on day one and neo-Nazis being very fine people. They would just throw that into the hodgepodge, of contraption of lies that they keep making about Donald Trump. People are talking about Tim Walz's comment about the school shooter thing because it's a heck of a tongue slip, man. It's a heck of a thing to accidentally say, but we can acknowledge, though, even though we're talking about it, that that was a mistake. If Donald Trump had slipped up or JD Vance had said something along those lines, they would just go for it, man. They would just pretend like Trump actually was friends with school shooters. So let me show you some memes. Well, let me show you this particular meme because the Trump campaign is being funny, but so they have stuff like this. Mark safe from being friends with a school shooter today. So they're making fun of Walz. They're not going out there claiming that he genuinely is friends with them or whatever. Though I well, I was gonna say they're just really bad on crime stuff, but in Minnesota, but I don't know, school shooting stuff. That's everyone takes that very seriously. Unfortunately, I mean we can't seem to come together for good solutions on this because so many people, I don't know, would rather score political points and they say do something, do something, do something, and they're willing to pass things that hinder people's liberties but won't actually solve the problem. So JD Vance, they did talk about that in the debate, and JD Vance is like, we have to harden schools. And that's just the reality. That's just the reality. I know we don't want that to be the reality, but there are psychopaths out there who will do evil to your children if you let them. So you got to make sure that you protect them the best that you can. Let me start with the moderator situation. Trying to find that. Now, JD Vance pointed out that they did not agree to have any fact checking. At the other debate, you had fact checking where ABC was fact checking solely Donald Trump, even though we know that Kamala Harris lied at different times and they could have easily fact checked Kamala Harris, but they only fact checked Trump. And I think they did it maybe like 5 times. Now, at this debate, they weren't supposed to fact check. So, CBS kept doing things where they would add these editorial notes, and it's like, why did you mention that at the end of that segment? And so they were talking about Haitian migrants in Springfield, and JD Vance is how he's trying to shift the conversation from they're eating the dogs, because it's like the only thing that people really remember from this debate with Trump and Kamala is they're eating the dogs, and there have been viral songs and dances and so on. I saw dramatic readings of Donald Trump's monologues. Just so much like golden content from that. Um, but there is a serious story in all this where you have all these illegal migrants who came, and they have legal status now. They have protective status now, but they did come in illegally, and they were dropped in Springfield, Ohio. It's already a very small town. So when you drop a lot of people in a very small town, you really start to overwhelm the community. The resources get overwhelmed, the culture gets overwhelmed, and people should be more sympathetic to what's going on. But people obviously are not. So anyway, that's what JD Vance shifts to and decides to talk about. And the moderators decided to say, like, hey, they have legal status. So I believe this is the right clip.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Sure. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
So there's some feminists on X and social media and stuff saying basically that JD Vance mansplained that moment, and when they're like, thank you for explaining the legal process, they're just like, oh, we felt that in our soul. It's like, first of all, if women cannot take being pushed back on or criticized, then they need to not be in spaces talking to men, like in professional settings. If you can't take a man pushing back or explaining something. Now, the reason why it was important to explain the context is because they were clear. First of all, that wasn't their place to be adding their editorial notes to fact check or whatever, for the audience, to give them some kind of context, to be like, oh, well, they're against legal immigration for these people coming in, and Trump, he's just against immigrants, period. And that's what people used to say. And I guess some people still say them, like, he's just against immigrants. No, first of all, he's married to one, by the way. He and the Republicans, a lot of Republicans, but we know there's many in lovers of power that are fine with the cheap labor or whatever, but are against illegal immigration. And they have protective status now. It was important for him to say that, but when they are flooding the border, they were not coming in legally. So it was important for him to add that note, and it was important for him to check them, because I think it was the second time maybe they added a note. Maybe that was the third time, and I don't think they did it again. I don't believe they did, but it was important for him to call them out. And some people were like, oh my gosh, this is so funny because JD Vance is letting it be known that he can't take being corrected, and they don't want there to be fact checkers, and that's why they're upset. They're upset because they're weaponizing stuff. ABC was fact checking Trump on stuff that he was actually right about, like crime and other stuff, like, but they clearly were fact checking him and not fact checking Kamala Harris, even though Kamala Harris was saying things that was blatantly not true. So they are setting up these things to try to come at Trump and Vance and to give Kamala and Walz their best shot, and trying not to make themselves look incredibly biased. Now, ABC, I thought, was absolutely embarrassing. That little stunt that they pulled on CBS right there was extraordinarily embarrassing. CNN was, did pretty well in their debate, but they were the moderators for the ABC debate. They were watching like CNN and stuff, and people were just kind of like, okay, well, they didn't do appropriately enough getting them or taking them to task, so they felt it was their mission or whatever. So it's not right. They should be trying to pursue truth, and maybe sometimes they tried to appear like they were, being fair to both sides, because they did ask a question of Tim Walz, like, hey, why did you say that you were in China, um you know at this point in time, and you weren't actually there? And which the answer is he lied, like he just lied. But instead, he was just like being honest. He made a big monologue and stuff, and they did ask like a follow-up, but that's the thing you ask about, not the stolen valor thing. That's clearly a thing that is far more controversial, that took up way more time in the news, not like his China connections as far as business, some of the communistic things that he seemed to have praised in the past. There's loads of things you could have mentioned. His history with I think it was drunk driving, and when he was pulled over, he tried to pretend like he was deaf. And that's why he couldn't like hear commands or respond to them appropriately and stuff. So there's a they didn't even talk much about his record. The only thing specifically I think they mentioned about his record as governor was really him signing that really radical abortion law, which he totally just tried to pretend like it wasn't as radical as it is. So they asked him a question about what something that he obviously lied about, but something that was probably the least controversial out of the scandals that have been involved with him since he's been running. Because why would they want to open that door for him to be attacked on the stolen valor thing? And JD Vance didn't broach the subject. JD Vance was not focused on going after Tim Walz. He was focused on making himself and Trump look palatable, because JD Vance has been attacked nonstop in the media. People have been calling it weird and taking stuff out of context, purposely lied about different comments that he's made, particularly something about a school shooting. I don't remember exactly. I think I wrote about it at the time on my website. I'm trying. Seems like that was forever ago. And I wrote about that. I guess it was a couple weeks ago, but let me see, what was it? Harris campaign lies about JD Vance's Georgia shooting comments. If you don't like this, I don't like to admit this. Sorry, it's very bright on my computer. I don't like that this is a fact of life, but if you're a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize our schools are soft targets, said Ohio Senator JD Vance on the campaign trail. We've got to bolster security so that if psycho wants to walk through the front door and kill a bunch of kids, they're not able to. So that's what he said. And they took that out of context and said like, oh, they did a statement. I think the news took him out of context first, and then Kamala Harris released a statement, and they were saying stuff online about how JD Vance is like, oh, he's saying we get over it. It's just a fact of life. It's like, that's not what he's saying. You say it's bad people are bad and they will do terrible things. And we have to find a way to best protect our children and stop evil people from doing evil stuff. Like putting your head in the sand and disarming people who want to protect their children isn't going to stop bad guys and psychos from doing evil stuff. It's just not. And they'll find a new way to harm people. For folks who are younger than I am, people used to be concerned about bomb threats and stuff all the time. There were anthrax scares, in the Bush era and stuff. So people will find a way to terrorize if they can terrorize and do different stuff. If you get rid of if you get rid of AR-15s, the AR-15s aren't even like the prime suspect in mass shootings. It's regular handguns. So after you get rid of the AR-15s and people are still doing mass shootings with handguns, what's the next step? To get rid of the handguns, right? And then it just continues on, and then they want to take away the knives and all kinds of different stuff, because people are evil. And You had people mowing down folks with cars. If you go to the White House, there's these big barriers up to stop people from. You used to be able to kind of drive kind of up there, but they put up these barriers so you can't just go and ram through stuff with your vehicle because people had started just doing that, across the country and stuff in different instances. So they had to make sure that you couldn't do that anymore. So people get creative and you find a way to mitigate risks, but they wanted to always take this man out of context. They were not kind with him at all. They were, forget kind, they just weren't fair. So JD Vance had to prove to the American people that he's not weird. Walz, out of the two of them, definitely proved that he was far weirder than JD Vance. Out of the four, JD Vance is far more normal than Trump, Kamala, and Tim Walz. So it's just all very interesting. What these people are willing to do, what they're willing to say to get ahead and try to win. There's just no honor here at all with these folks. JD, he succeeded. Let me show you an example. Like, people are saying this is like the prime moment where JD just kind of sums up everything about this debate and why he's winning this thing and Walz is not.
Honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
So, by the way, you guys have seen, I've talked about it, but I'm sure you guys have seen by now that sort of attacks that they're doing with JD Vance. Like, oh, he went to Ivy League school. Like, oh, and Tim Walz, like, none of my kids who I taught went to Ivy League schools. I'm like, why are you bragging about that? Why is it a bad thing that JD Vance did well for himself after growing up dirt poor with like an addicted mom and all this like terrible stuff that he went through and was able to rise up and is right now running for vice president? Do we not believe in the like Rocky story, the underdog, the achievement that he's had? Like, they're trying to make him, as if he's some kind of silver spoon Ivy League some person or whatever. And instead of just saying, hey, we really admire that story and we want to continue making it so that people like JD Vance are possible. And they should argue, or could try to argue, and their strategy should, instead of trying to bring him down, should be Trump will prevent more people like JD Vance from succeeding. Like, there are resources that were available to him. We want to make sure that we keep making sure that those are provided. That's the route that they should go. Now, Trump isn't for like really cutting any programs, it seems like, this time around or anything. So it's not a good case probably for them to make, but they lie about so much. Why not just go ahead and make that case instead of pretending like it's a bad thing that he succeeded in life? And they make it seem like Trump being a rich guy is so awful, even though many people aspire to have that kind of success. But while they had Oprah and billionaires, people who bragged about being richer than Trump at the convention, and people who went to Ivy League schools got up and were on the convention stage with the Democrats. So they have these like really awful sort of attacks going against JD Vance. But JD Vance was so good at, attacking Kamala, focusing on policy, making Trump look good, and then still weaving in little stories about his family and his struggles without having to go into like these huge monologues that Kamala Harris do. And it's funny that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they're like, we're middle class people, we're this, we're that. If they were trying to go that route, I'm gonna have to make a skit or something like, I grew up in the middle class. I'm like, that's not relatable to me, man. Like, that's not relatable to me. Like, congratulations, you got to live paycheck by paycheck. I had to live faith by faith. Like, Lord, you gotta move. Like, that's my life. So just shut up and tell your story. Stop trying to like relate to so many people. Just, just be honest about who you are, and don't try to like throw those stories around with every little question when it's asked. Just, if someone says, hey, what are you going to do for the American people as soon as you're in charge, don't go into some kind of long monologue about how you're the child in the middle class and some woman that you grew up with was like a second mom. That's not what people are asking you. And we're in a generation where people are so, stuck on their phones and watching, it was Vines and now it's TikTok and YouTube shorts and things like that. And people do watch long form content, but our attention spans are short. And I'm like, I don't want to have to listen to 5 minutes of an answer for you to say like one sentence of substance when I don't care about your backstory. I just want an answer to the question. And that's what's really frustrating. I don't need you to just vomit compassion on me because I don't believe that you're sincere in the least bit. So you can just give me the answer and let's get it over with. Like, stop wasting my time. My time is valuable. My time is valuable. Like, I know you're just getting a check from, your job as in the government or whatever, regardless. Like, but everybody else has to grind. Okay. So my time is valuable. So just answer the freaking question. So it's so strange to me how they'll try to make themselves so down, so relatable, but then they will trash JD Vance, who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and just try to disregard his life. It's so bizarre. I saw a video, and I didn't see the original video. I saw someone reply to the video, and I have to find this original video because I have to reply to it. But they're like, did you notice that the person who was saying that grandmothers should be watching people's kids instead of healthcare workers or whatever is the same one who had a crackhead for a mama? I bet she don't watch his kids. And it was 2 black women who were like, like just super, super ignorant, diamond and silk or something. But I'm like, what do y'all have against grandmothers? Like, because this doesn't seem like an attack that is solely just going after JD Vance, which his mother is clean, and I'm sure that she probably does watch his kids from time to time. But I would assume that JD probably has his children most of the time, and they're in kind of close proximity with him and his wife because they're just really busy people. But I would assume his mother, who is clean, probably does watch his kids from time to time. But when JD Vance says, hey, there's some people, because they talked about the not the healthcare, but childcare situation and how there's a big crisis in the country. And JD's like, we have a demand problem. And there's some people who would rather have their church participate in that. So are we going to be able to get resources for churches to be able to do those sorts of things, or resources, I don't know, for some parents or grandparents or whatever to help them be able to do that as well. So, which I don't, would the government fund grandmas? Like, I don't know where they're going exactly with that, but this idea that people are like scoffing at family members helping out and taking care of their grandchildren is so strange to me. It's so strange to me. My sister was just, after my mom passed, we were just thinking about all the things that my mom did, and she's like, my mom would do so much for the kids and would buy so much of their clothes, and and not because mom, my parents are like wealthy or anything like that, but my mom, she just shops well, loves a good deal, and she's very mindful. And she would just shop through the years. And so everybody got a bundle of clothes on Christmas. We're like, it's not just your kids, you buy stuff for everybody. Like, my mom bought a huge chunk of my clothes. So so people just ragging on grandmothers. That's so strange to me. What Like that is more odd for sure than him ragging on crazy childless cat ladies. Y'all are up here ragging on grandmothers because he said, hey, maybe the grandmothers would like to watch the kids. Cause little Susie, and Martha at the clinic getting paid pennies or whatever for the kids, they're overworked, man. They are. And you, even if you do get more money from the government to subsidize this stuff, you're still gonna need more people to be involved with healthcare. I mean, in childcare. It's a big problem, and I don't know exactly what all is the solution for it. It is a mess, but people mocking the whole grandma thing is I don't know. Maybe people just want to hate and they haven't even really thought this stuff through. Maybe they really haven't thought this stuff through. A very interesting part of the debate was when JD was asked about January 6th, and he totally pivoted, or at least he tried to. Now, I think that wasn't the finest moment for JD, just because I think it's hard for Trump and at this point JD, whoever his vice presidential candidate would have been, it would have been hard to navigate around the January 6th issue because, if Mike Pence went ahead and certified the election, I know there's a lot of Republicans really mad at him, but Democrats, moderates, a lot of Republicans appreciate the fact that Mike Pence just did it. And in the pursuit of people trying to be Trump's VP candidate and stuff, or just appeal to Republican base, they said stuff like Mike Pence was wrong, or they would have, not certified the election, they would have sent it back, etc. That raises red flags for people, And Tim Walz, I think he said something along the lines of, Mike Pence did the right thing, and that's why he's not on the stage now. That's why he's not the vice presidential candidate anymore. Which is a good dig. So it's hard for them to get around that stuff. No, JD Vance did try his darndest, though. He pivoted the entire conversation, or he tried to pivot the conversation into censorship. And it was a good attempt, and I think it was largely successful. It wasn't, I won't say mostly successful, because he still had to deal with the January 6th stuff. But he did pivot, and here's a clip of that.
I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
So, heck of a pivot. A very good pivot. Again, I don't think he could get totally unscathed with the Jan 6 thing, but that was a good pivot. And I think he could have went harder since he went that route. But he is correct about the censorship stuff. The first of all, we're not a democracy, but as far as the threats that are imposed upon with Trump or Kamala Harris, I've made this case already, like on my site and stuff, and to you guys when Joe Biden was running again. on how he is a threat to democracy, the bigger threat, him and basically everything that has been thrown in the arsenal to try to take down Donald Trump is the bigger threat to all of us. And it still remains true with Kamala Harris. The way that the media, for example, have acted with Kamala Harris, whether it was with the debates or her allowing her to not really get any questions asked for, it was a solid 40 days before she did an interview, and then it was a joint interview with Tim Walz that didn't last very long. And MSNBC got an interview with her after they're like, oh, she shouldn't have to answer very hard questions. It's like, that's my girl right there. And then they had, that interview. So she's doing some more now. And I probably because whatever their internal polling is, people are still saying they don't really know her, don't really trust her. So her hiding isn't ultimately going to be a very good strategy. Joe Biden did the basement strategy, but at least, he's been around for a very long time, so, and then he was vice president for 8 years, and people viewed, there's issues during Obama's time and tenure, but Democrats view, I think, that the era more fondly than what they're viewing right now. So Kamala Harris has a lot more challenges, and then she was very absent as vice president anyway, and she was supposed to be over the border. Obviously, she was a border czar. Her role didn't pan out very well, and there was these reports about people she had to let go or were let go, and just kind of chaos behind the scenes involving her, with her kind of being unlikable. And she would have interviews like you haven't been to the border and I haven't been to Europe, instances like that where she just wasn't very good, and they had to do multiple rollouts with Kamala Harris. And she didn't really help Joe Biden at all, I would say. I think the only thing that she did for him, and people on the left would be really offended by this, but the only thing she did for him was be brown and a woman. That's the only thing she really brought to Joe Biden. Like, when you compare what JD Vance is doing, just so he's able to defend Trump and be so articulate in a way that Kamala Harris could only dream. And she just was not a solid partner for Joe Biden in the way that Pence was for Trump, or JD is currently for Trump, or she didn't offer any commanding kind of leadership like Cheney. It's funny when Democrats are like, well, vice president doesn't do anything anyway. I'm like, I'm old enough to remember Dick Cheney, guys. Vice presidents can do a lot. Mike Pence did a lot with the task force. So Kamala Harris, she just really was selected to be a woman and to be brown. And people will be offended by that, but tell me what she did that was so substantial. I know she broke ties and stuff like that, and another Democrat could have done that as well. But as far as what she's had to offer to make the Biden-Harris administration better, what did she do? They rolled her out to say some pro-choice speeches for a pro-abortion stuff, had her go to an abortion clinic and so on. That any Democrat could have did that. She adds nothing of substance to the administration, and I don't think that should be controversial, me saying that, but I know people will be mad about it. But it's true. It's the truth anyhow. But anyway, the censorship thing, JD Vance could have went harder, and Tim Walz had said that he was concerned about going after political opponents or jailing political opponents. And I thought, and other people thought, you can nail him now, JD. Go after, Kamala for going after David Daleiden for exposing Planned Parenthood for selling baby body parts, or talk about how the Biden-Harris administration went after pro-lifers and so on. But he didn't go there. So just like I was frustrated last time at Trump's debate where there were some moments where he definitely could have went in and tore like a new one into Kamala Harris, and Trump just missed like so many opportunities. JD for me did miss some of those opportunities, but I think his goal was to mostly be presentable and pleasant. And there were many pleasant moments between him and Tim Walz where they found agreements and so on. But Kamala Harris has not been properly examined by the American people. And there's some good ads out there by like McCormick, who's running for Senate. And the Trump team will put out a good ad or two every now and then. But mostly I see Kamala ads. Someone mentioned that before my show started yesterday, a Kamala ad popped up. They're very heavy in their ads, especially like mobile stuff, and they're outspending, so they're really trying to define themselves and define Trump. And Trump had an opportunity to really nail her to her record, to her words, and so on. He goes in the rallies and he'll say his piece, and JD Vance and them, Trump, they'll go on these podcasts and do interviews, and then they'll ream her. But as far as an opportunity where she's in front of the American people and someone to really go through her record and have her answer for the stuff that she said, tried to implement, that she proposed and supported, like she's really never been scorched for her record. And JD Vance didn't go as hard as he didn't go hard. He just didn't. And I guess that was part of the strategy, because he wanted to come off as safe. He wanted to come off as safe to people. And I think he did. And by the way, it's not just Republicans saying that he won. Democrats, they're out there sending their texts to each other, upset because of how Tim Walz did. I've seen commentary from news people that have been harsher about Tim Walz's debate performance than I am. They were not happy. And there's commentary going around where people are like, oh, well, the VP doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter that much. It doesn't really matter that much, but you can't say it doesn't really matter that much and then be like, oh, well, Kamala Harris is obviously the most qualified because she's the vice president of the United States. You can't have it both ways. So either they're important or they're not. But Tim Walz didn't do a great job. He didn't like totally crash and burn, especially to the levels of what we witnessed with Joe Biden, But JD Vance was just better. I wish we got to see, JD Vance versus Kamala Harris. That would have been great. That would have been so good. It would have been so good. But maybe he wouldn't have gone hard after Kamala still. In that instance either. I guess he just would have been focused on Joe Biden, what they did and didn't do in their administration. So, some other moments at the debate. Sorry about that. Other moments at the debate, they talked about abortion. I thought that was JD's weakest moment. And again, I think he's trying to make himself feel safe. I don't appreciate Republicans talking about this issue and really not advocating for the children who are being killed. Like they do it when they're talking about late term, like, oh, it's barbaric. But that's the same human being at all points of the pregnancy. And I would just love if someone said, I understand this is a very personal issue to a lot of folks and it's very controversial, but we do have to have this conversation and really understand the seriousness of it, because whether you feel like a woman needs to have an abortion or not, we are having a conversation about killing human children. And you know what? The media won't tell you the truth about what is. I would love for someone to just kind of lay it out and explain what happens in the first, second, and third trimester all the way through. There's people who take the pill and don't know that they're suffocating and starving their child to death. They're just told like it's just a clump of whatever. It's just like passing a heavy period. Like that's all they'll tell them. So I would love if someone laid it out. And I feel like we've missed such a huge opportunity because Kamala and Tim Walz are so radical, and we could provide a proper contrast. People want to vote for someone who is different. Like you saw last night Tim Walz and JD Vance, you know, saying like, I agree with you, I agree with you, I agree with you. Like there were clear differences and stuff, but both of them were trying to come off like they're moderate, and I didn't love it, you know. I want some clear contrast here, especially with this particular issue. And I feel the more that they try to moderate on this issue, the more silly they just all look with it. There are moments where JD Vance he was very apologetic. He's like, we just need to do better, and just like finger wagging and stuff. I'm like, bro, you're supposed to be the one saying it's the role of the government to defend life, the inalienable right to life. That is our purpose. That is our purpose. If people just said, my stance is, if both can live, both should live. What do you say to that? Now, people have plenty to say to that, but like, as far as a coherent argument, you're really going to be up here saying, no, I think the baby should die, even if both can live. Let them say that with their full chest. Let them say that with their full chest. But Tim Walz brought up Amber Thurman. We briefly talked about her yesterday, but Amber Thurman was a young woman who had an abortion. She took the abortion pills, and she had twins. From my understanding, it's not a great time to take the pill anyway. But she took the pills, and a danger from taking the pills, the abortion lobby wants to say, oh, they're just safe. They're so safe. They're so safe. They're so safe. They're safer than abortion. They're safer than Tylenol, which is really not true. But she ended up getting sepsis and dying. Now, the doctors should have treated her, but Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are out there trying to say that this woman was killed because of pro-life laws and abortion bans and so on. And if Roe v. Wade was still here, then those doctors would have got the corpses of her babies out of her immediately, and so on. There's no law that says if you have a dead baby in you that it cannot be removed. There is no law that says that. So it wasn't any kind of pro-life law or restriction that killed her. She deliberately chose to kill her children, and the after effects of that ended up killing her. Her making her womb a tomb for her children ended up being what also ended her own life. And she should have got immediate treatment for that. But at the same time, she should have never been allowed in it at any state in the country, because she had to travel out of state. It should not have been allowed anywhere for her to be able to kill her children like that. So an abortion ban, a federal abortion ban, would have saved her life and the life of her two children. That's what I wanted to hear. But it didn't seem like JD Vance, because all he said about that story was like, yeah, I wish she was still here. So I don't know if he didn't know the details of that story, which I would have definitely been prepped on that, because that's something Kamala and Tim Walz have been talking about. So I was surprised Tim Walz brought it up, to be frank. I'm like, this is such terrible misinformation. These people have no shame. So maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, because they have no shame. But he kind of just let that misinformation slide. But there were conversations about the radical law about his state and how far they allow abortion, which Tim Walz just, he's like, it's not what it says. It's not what it says. It's not what it says. But there was something that people are pointing out. It was pretty egregious, because he quoted the Bible, Matthew 25 and 40, when it came to immigration and what America should do as far as handling migrants and stuff. But it's like, why don't you apply that logic to, if you're going to talk about the least among us who need some kind of care, love, and protection, why not the baby in the womb? So this is that moment when you reference the scripture.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people. I don't talk about my faith.
So, by the way, this border bill that they're like, Trump killed this border bill. They want money and resources for ICE to just usher people into the country. there are lots of problems with that. By the way, there was a Republican bill that the Democrats did not want to push because they probably just thought it was too harsh. Now, as JD Vance pointed out, there are things that you could have just did via executive order, but on day one, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden very quickly started dismantling things that Trump did, like remain in Mexico and ceasing deportations. Like that was their priority on day one. Not to secure the border, but to just, push out stuff that Trump did, to undo Trump. That was what they wanted to do on day one. Not to secure the border. So that's what they could mention, that there was a better bill that the Democrats did not want to push because that would actually solve problems. They want ushers. They don't want, people actually stopping the drug cartels from controlling our border and so on. I mean, when Texas tried to take matters into their own hands to secure the border, did the Biden administration not fight them? So they had to take down barbed wire and all kinds of different stuff. So just stop. But there's more things that JD could have mentioned, like in that segment. But I mean, he still did a good job. But them using the only time they want to talk about the Bible is really that kind of scripture, Matthew 25:40, and like, oh, the least of these, we got to be kind to these people who illegally came into the country. But yes, we can absolutely murder those babies. Put them in the fiery furnace. Sacrifice them on this altar of self. So they're just the worst. They're just the worst. Let me see if I can find the clip of them talking about the law. Yeah, here we go.
Wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
this,
how? I've given this advice on a lot of things that
like, oh, the doctors, oh, the ones, they should decide this and that, blah, blah, blah. It is, which, by the way, there have been some fact checks on JD Vance or on this particular point. They're trying to say that, no, the doctors do want, adjustments for these laws or whatever. And so, yeah, it's false. But no, JD Vance is correct in his explanation of Tim Walz and the things that he signed. And Live Action and Pints of Aquinas have videos of former abortion doctors talking about what they did. And even instances, particularly on the Pints of Aquinas, I saw a clip of an abortion doctor talking about when their babies that survived the abortion and how they would just, don't want to disturb the mother. So they're trying to kind of suffocate them with a towel or something until they die. And it could be in instances where there's no way to save them anyway because they're not viable. But obviously it's barbaric. But the whole procedure is barbaric at every point of it. I don't like the obsession from Trump and Vance right now. And JD Vance was very pro-life, and I assume he still considers himself to be, but he's obviously adjusting a lot of his conversations and how he goes about this because of Trump, to appease kind of what their campaign is, where they're trying to go with it. And I don't appreciate it, but um it's barbaric the whole entire time. I don't like the obsession with purely just the late term abortions, because it is such a small percentage. Now, that small percentage is still like 10,000 or so babies or more. That's more than we obsess with like unarmed black men being killed by police. That number is what, 20? We're talking about like 10,000 babies being killed late term abortion. And they're not all for tragic situations. And sometimes when people say tragic situations, it could be the kid has Down syndrome, not that the kid has no brain and is going to die as soon as they get out of the womb, you know? So, but sometimes it is just like, oh, I couldn't make up my mind, or oh, I didn't get really the money until now, or my circumstances change. I didn't know I was pregnant, and women will go ahead and abort late term to viable fetuses. It's not just all, oh, I got some bad news about my baby, therefore I'm going to put them out of their misery and euthanize them. It's not just that, but is the same human being throughout the entire pregnancy. When people say, well, how can you argue that it's not wrong to have an abortion in the first trimester? Because at no point would I ever argue that it was justifiable to kill me. I wouldn't argue that. And I wouldn't be me here today if I wasn't a 6-week, embryo. I wouldn't be here. So I had value the whole entire time. My life had value. Those stages of development, even though I didn't have consciousness and other things that people see as particularly valuable or hadn't actualized yet. Of course, I had that inherent nature to myself at that time. My development was important the entire way through. It's like saying, how can you, let's say people didn't value people until they can walk. That's really silly. Like looking at my niece, for example, who's like kind of crawling right now, she's clearly going to be able to actualize the ability to walk, but she's just developing, growing in strength to be able to do that. So these moments where she's learning and gaining the strength to be able to get to that moment are valuable. She's still valuable, even though she hasn't reached that stage where she can get up and run and chase her siblings or something like that. But still the same human being, and will continue to be the same human being as she grows and develops. But I can't just say, well, you're not valuable now because you haven't reached this point. She's always been the same valuable human. So I wouldn't argue at any point that it would have been okay to unjustly unalive me. So I don't like the focus on the late term stuff. And I know it's easier for people to kind of visualize that that's a baby. Hey, that's wrong to do that. But when push comes to shove, a lot of these pro-choice people, even, will be like, well, I don't like it, but they'll still, though, at the end of the day, say it's a woman's choice, And so even like states that say like, hey, you can have an abortion up to viability, and people were like, okay, well, yeah, I'm okay with that. They'll still say things like, oh, what if like one person, healthcare professional, not even your doctor, says, well, you could have an abortion for the sake of your mental health. You could still get an abortion afterwards, or just like health of the mother. And health may entail like financial health and other stuff like that. You have to really look at the details and how they'll try to exploit these things. So one way or another, women can still get abortions past viability on healthy, viable fetuses. So I wish JD and Trump just showed some more courage with this position in defending life. But let's continue watching the rest of this particular segment.
Getting involved, getting engaged. That's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation.
I don't know
of
what
these
he's talking about being
to
fact-checked,
try and
though.
tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this: just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more.
So he's just denying what his laws do. Just so you know, because Kamala Harris lied about this at the last debate, Roe v. Wade does allow states to allow abortion up until in the 9th month, if that is what the state wants to do. What Roe v. Wade actually did is it prevented states from saving the lives of children up until a certain point. So the Dobbs decision, there was a Mississippi law that said, hey, you cannot abort after 15 weeks. And most people don't think you should be able to get an abortion, elective abortion, after 15 weeks. But a 15-week ban cannot exist at the same time as Roe v. Wade. People don't understand that. So Kamala Harris lied when she said, oh, you can't have, there weren't late-term abortions under Roe v. Wade. That was obviously hogwash, and they did not fact check her on that. And I think it's funny that they want to restore Roe v. Wade, but they're too cowardly to admit what Roe v. Wade actually does. So why do you want to restore something that you won't even defend? You won't even be honest about, it's just a really trashy thing to do. A really trashy thing to do. And what do school lunches have to do with y'all killing babies? Like, that was such a weird answer from Tim Walz. Such a weird answer. Donald Trump did tweet something about the debate regarding the abortion issue, and it made me annoyed. He said, everyone knows I would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances, and would in fact veto it, because it is up to the states to decide based on the will of their voters, the will of the people. Like Ronald Reagan before me, I fully support 3 exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I do not support the Democrats' radical position of late-term abortion, like, as an example, in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month, or in case there's any question, the possibility of execution of the baby after birth. Thank you for your attention to this matter. It's very hard not to pay attention when you just all cap the entire thing. At the last debate, Donald Trump, when it was asked whether or not he would veto an abortion ban, he danced around it. And he said, well, because JD Vance said that he would veto it. And he's like, well, I didn't talk to JD about it, but he wouldn't answer. And he tried to pivot with getting Kamala Harris to answer whether or not she supported any kind of limits on abortion, which she doesn't support limits. She actually voted against providing care for children, or mandating care for children who survive abortions. So she's as radical as they come. But that was my flicker of hope in this issue, when I was like, oh, he doesn't want to say that he wouldn't veto it. Therefore, it probably means that he wouldn't veto it. So now he's tweeting in all caps that he would veto it, and that's pretty bad. And I don't like that. He's so frustrating. He's so frustrating. It drives me crazy. Ronald Reagan, he had particular reasons why he was for abortion in the cases of rape and incest. Life of the mother, every single pro-life law has a life of the mother exception. But Reagan's mentality was that it's self-defense, because a woman didn't ask for that. So there's a lot of pro-lifers who give that exceptions, and their argument is causal obligation. So if you cause the child to exist, then yes, you have an obligation to take care of the child. And in the case where someone is sexually assaulted and impregnated, they obviously didn't purposely, purpose is, I guess, the wrong word, but they didn't engage in the act of procreation purposefully to create the baby. So Ronald Reagan saw it as the woman being able to kind of practice self-defense. Now, I don't think that position is entirely coherent when you really think about it, because I'm like, okay, if it's an act of self-defense, like who is aggressing upon you? I mean, the victim in this situation would be the mother and both the baby. So I don't I can kind of see where he's coming from, but I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. But I if your position is it's human life and they have an inalienable right to life, therefore you shouldn't kill the baby. Making an exception in this kind of circumstance would actually undercut the pro-life argument. And then you're just discriminating against people because you're saying, well, it's wrong to kill babies, but not that baby. That baby you can totally kill. So I understand why I believe that he probably absolutely believes in those exceptions, and it's not just for political reasons, because most people do grant those exceptions. But I just one day, if you have this position, I just want to warn people, one day you might get into a conversation where you have to talk to somebody like Destiny, for example. He was on a podcast with Jedediah Bila. And, she's like, it's wrong to kill babies, wrong to kill babies, wrong to kill baby. Now, Destiny is for abortion up until consciousness. And she's like, it's wrong to kill babies, just wrong to kill babies, wrong to kill baby. And then when it got to like the subject of in the case of rape, and she's like, well, no, I grant that exception. He's like, wait, hold on a second. What do you mean you grant that exception? And she's like, well, it's just hard in that situation. He's like, why is it hard? You said it's wrong to kill a baby. Like, that's your whole argument. It is wrong to kill a baby. So it's wrong to kill a baby. Like, why is it not wrong to kill this baby? And so she didn't have a good answer. Is it somehow right to kill this baby? So I'm gonna warn you folks, if that's your position, you might get into a position where someone might just, start tapping at the glass and it just starts cracking. So I've talked about this particular topic a lot in the case of rape, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm over on my time anyway. But we'll talk more about that another day. But I did cover this topic quite a bit in my book, of course, guys, against abortion. Let me take that down so you can see it. So that's what's here on my shelf and behind me here. But you guys can check out that book on Amazon. Because I did tackle the exceptions in that book. So anyway, I there's a clip that I want to show you guys with Jim Acosta, but I think I will save that for tomorrow because it's not really about the debate. So I'll save it tomorrow. It's it's so funny to me. I'll have to just leave you hanging with a little teaser. But overall, JD Vance really did a fantastic job with the debate. There was, I got some criticism here or there. People are like 10 out of 10, 10. I don't know if it's 10 out of 10 for me. Like, but it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say like 8.5 or maybe even a 9, because you have to consider they're not going to do everything that you want them to do, but what was important for them to do. And overall, I think JD accomplished his goals, accomplished his missions. There were moments where he could have pounced on some opportunities that he didn't take, but he mostly nailed and redirected and answered questions in such a competent manner and explained the Trump agenda far better than Trump has been able to accomplish as of late. So kudos to him handling Walz and the moderators and their foolishness with their editorial comments here or there, calling them out and saying, hey, you guys agreed to not do this thing and here you are doing it. That needed to be said. And so I'm glad that he was able to take the 3-on-1. I wish Trump was able to do that. We can whine about how unfair it was for Trump to have to fight the moderators and the fact checking and Kamala Harris all at the same time. But it's just really a fact of life. So that Trump that was willing to go out and do press conferences and just spar with everybody, you got to come with that same energy. Like, I know he's not as young as he was a couple of years ago, but you got to, the fate of the country is on the line. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Please go to black2news.com. Check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. Someone did say in the comments that there's some things that you can't say at a debate, on a national debate stage, and I think that's true. But at the same time, they talk about some pretty gruesome things. They mention rape and all sorts of different stuff on the debate stage repeatedly, and the gruesome stories about their pro-choice propaganda. A lot of the stuff is like straight propaganda. So I don't think it would be bad for someone to just kind of break down the truth in an honest way to the American people that they are unaware of. So I'm assuming that comment was directed toward what I would like them to do about abortion, but yeah, they just kind of want to surrender the ground on that. And again, I do think it's a shame, because I think this would be the perfect opportunity to offer a contrast, instead of just kind of surrendering all the ground. I wish that Trump and Vance were like running like a small government, kind of basic conservative kind of campaign again, which would be a good contrast to these radicals. But they found a lot of common ground, at least on the debate stage. So, but there's one thing though, a fact check the CNN did. Let me play it for you guys before I let you go, because Tim Walz told a whopper of a lie about Project 2025, which is not Trump's thing. And also they tried to say that Trump was going to have pregnant women register so they can keep track of their pregnancies and stuff. So CNN did a random act of journalism and actually fact checked this. So keep in mind, this is my thing that I keep saying, and I think that Trump, the campaign, and other surrogates and stuff should adopt this principle that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, when they attack Trump, they attack like a fantasy. They smear. They go, oh, Project 2025, Project 2025. They don't talk about his actual agenda. They don't talk about Agenda 47. They don't talk about the Republican platform. They don't want to draw attention to those things. They only want it to be drawn to Project 2025. And even the thing that they say here in Project 2025 isn't even in Project 2025. It's just a lie. It's just not true. So they rely on these lies. Donald Trump relies on the truth about Kamala Harris. Those are his attacks. He just says, look at what she said about fracking. Look what she said about mandatory gun buybacks. Look what she said about getting rid of the private healthcare market. Look at all these things that she's done. She was a tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which was actually like a climate change bill and a green bill, and wasn't even much about reducing inflation, and it didn't reduce inflation. Like, he just points to things that actually happened and things that she actually supported. And Kamala Harris has to rely on these smear campaigns. So that's what I told the media, and that's what the Trump campaign and the surrogates and all these folks should just point out, because not only are they lying on Trump, they're lying on Project 2025, and they're relying on the fact that it's 900 pages and no one is actually going to read it. Some people came at me about Project 2025, and so I looked up what they were talking about. I'm like, what they were talking about isn't even true. And some of the stuff is actually pretty good. So I only read a chapter. I don't want to read anymore, because it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. But they're not even being honest about what's actually in it. So that's CNN did a random act of journalism, and I can't take credit for that claim by that phrase. Rush Limbaugh made it up. But here we go.
So first, let's listen to something that Governor Walz said about the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank's initiative known as Project 2025.
Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception, and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments.
This claim, which Governor Walz has made before, is false. Project 2025's 900-page policy document is online. You can read it. I've read it. Nothing in it proposes to make anyone register their pregnancy with the government. What Project 2025 25 does propose is that the federal government takes steps to make sure it is getting from every state detailed after the fact anonymous data on abortion and miscarriage. The federal government already gets this data from almost every state on a voluntary basis. Project 2025 wants to make it mandatory for all states, but there's no pregnancy registration involved in this data collection today. Project 2025 doesn't propose to change that. And in fact, Tim Walz's own state of Minnesota already posts detailed after the fact anonymous abortion and miscarriage data online on the state health department website. There is no pregnancy registration in Minnesota, of course. And I should also note that while the governor referred to their Project 2025, it is not an initiative of the Trump-Vance campaign itself.
So there you have it. Random act of journalism from CNN. The whole Project 2025, but it's a boogeyman, guys. It's not even his agenda, and even the things that they claim about Project 2025 is not even accurate. It's not even accurate, which, by the way, the states do report this stuff, and it is on a voluntary basis. So if you go to the CDC and try to find out stuff about abortion and so on, and like, oh, the numbers are this. Some of those states don't even report. Like large states like California, for example, might be left out. So there's a lot of information that we don't have. And I don't understand why you wouldn't want to report things on miscarriages and so on, because what if you have some kind of like crisis where there's just some kind of health thing that's underlying that have caused more miscarriages to happen, and you guys don't want there to be data? Like accessible federal data about that stuff. But it's probably just they want to focus on the miscarriage thing because they don't want there to be like mandatory reporting on abortion stats and so on, because they don't want people to know how often they're doing it, what methods they're doing to the babies to kill them, to the reasons why, which they won't probably do the reasons, but they just don't want more data on it. They want it to be something that women just do and people just shut up about it and keep their eyes closed. So, at the very least, though, if Republicans aren't going to do a better job like advocating for the children and do all the stuff that I want them to do, they could at least just point out the fact that, if abortion is a necessary evil, let's go with that. Let's just grant the premise that abortion just has to be a necessary evil that we have in our society. Why is it that the Democrats seem gung-ho on just protecting abortion as opposed to creating a culture where women don't do this? And because if abortion is a necessary evil, it is still killing a child. And so that needs to be the last option, the very last option on the table. But Democrats oppose pregnancy crisis centers, for example. They really aren't too fond of informed consent. And they want to make it so that, minors and other folks can get abortions without their parents knowing. And then you might have a tragic situation where a minor dies without their parents even knowing that they've gone to get an abortion. And you don't want that to be the case. But the pro-abortion lobby, wants that to be the case. As soon as a woman wants an abortion, they don't want her will to be obstructed at all. When we as a society can at least try to convince the woman to not do the thing, even if we have to allow the thing to happen. And I don't agree that we should allow it to happen, but the Democrats don't seem keen on at least trying to convince her to not unalive her child. And that is a problem. That could at least be the bare minimum, but that is a choice that the Democrats are making to push abortion rather than to push a culture of life. So anyway, I'm sorry. That is like my second or third closing. So I am going to say goodbye. Thank you guys. Please check out my merchandise on my website. If you would like to support, please consider leaving a donation on the website, checking out my different books and so on. All that does support and help. Thank you guys. And I will see you tomorrow.